Hello, welcome to another episode of Live Stream Insiders with me, Peter Stewart, and my co-host Krishna Day. Together we bring you the very latest live video and live stream news. And this week for the week beginning the 31st of July. It is episode 44. We've been going for 44 weeks. And as I say, together we bring you the latest live stream news in 30 minutes. The clock is ticking, Krishna. Let's get cracking.
Absolutely. We've got lots of things to cover this week. We're going to be talking about, could we use robots for live streaming? What are the implications of live streaming for politics and much more? We want to make sure that we bring you the latest news, technologies, and also case studies. So we've got lots of great things coming up in the show today. So in terms of getting started, I think we'll go straight to the first story, Peter, that we're looking at in terms of something I'm interested in what your view is, because I certainly have a different view to the author. So this article actually appeared on Abson, I think it was TechCrunch originally. Basically, the comment is about mobile live streaming need waiting rooms. And so I've already declared that I have a different opinion to this, but let's see what the author talks about. He's saying that live streams start off being very boring because broadcasters don't want to begin the real action until more people have tuned in. That can take a few minutes, and even with live streamers being very rapidly distributed across push notifications and newsfeed, for example, on Facebook, or tweets that might go out if you're on Periscope, their view is we need to actually take a different approach to our live streams. And talk about the fact that movies start by marketing many months in advance. And it's true in terms of mobile live streams. Some people do market them and do promote them well in advance. For example, General Electric. But in fact, many other people say, I'm live. I'm seeing something interesting. Let's go and stream now. They actually talk about the fact that if you're in the music business, concerts have openers. And they're saying that, in fact, there's obviously the engagement graph that's come along with Facebook that also helps people get to kind of the meat of the content if you're watching a replay. But I've definitely got a different opinion about whether or not we should have some kind of waiting room where we get everybody lined up and going, woo, 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 before we come on. Because specifically, Peter, you took a very different approach in terms of the live streams that you've done for well over a year and the methodology that you teach. So I'm interested in terms of, do you think that mobile live streams should have a waiting room?
You know what? I love the point that you made there about, live streaming is all about, well, a lot of it is about in-the-moment stuff, striking where the iron is hot. When you've got something fantastic to say or something brilliant to show, I thoroughly get that. But I think the problem with having a waiting room is a couple of fold, really. Number one, it does mean that it just makes your Periscope, your Facebook Live go on even longer. And sometimes, as we've been saying so many times, cut down, just have the content concentrated, which is why we just have 30 minutes in our show to crack in and pack in as much as possible. And I think if you're going to have a waiting room and people talking about and milling around beforehand and talking amongst themselves before you start, it just means that you could go on for longer. Whereas actually part of the skill is starting on time, getting in, saying your hellos, explaining where you're going to be going, and then starting that journey almost immediately. And I think it is a wasted opportunity. You know what? If you, instead of having a waiting room, actually have, if you want to have specific shows and you want to build up some anticipation and you want to build up an audience ahead of time, advertise it better, and maybe schedule things so they're on at regular times. And you know what? Nowadays, with fantastic apps on your iPhone, like PicMonkey, which have come onto the iPhone in the last couple of weeks, and Canva as well, frankly, no excuse for not doing some fantastic graphics, some brilliant text, and pumping that out a few days beforehand to build up the advertising and the marketing, so people join you when you say you are going to be on. So having a green room, great idea. It's going to make people lazy.
My other thought is don't forget Android, and of course PicMonkey is available on Android too. So the other thing I'd say is if you're using Facebook Live in terms of your profile, one of the things, if you do want to kind of have a little bit of a warm up, you can trim your content. It's not available on your page, but you could do that. But I certainly take the approach. I'm learning from the best here with you, Peter, and take the approach that you do in terms of the work that you do also in the media industry. So what about the next story for us?
So we've got some advice. This is also a little bit controversial as well. So hold on to your hats because someone has been talking about a big problem that Facebook Live has, and that is the number of people producing good content. And this is from businessinsider.com. Hold on, what's that? I've heard this before. Absolutely, because that is the reason that Meerkat pivoted and said, you know what, we've got plenty of people watching, but not many people actually producing some big, fantastic, brilliant content that people actually want to emulate and do themselves. So live video views are steadily increasing, but the number of streams and the number of accounts making them have not seen a similar spike. This is according to data from Tubular Labs, which is a video intelligence software company. They say there were actually slightly fewer live streamed videos in June than there were in May. What's that already? Facebook Live stream numbers taking a bit of a tumble. Apparently, the number of accounts live broadcasting increased by only 40,000 May to June versus 115,000 between April and May. So the numbers are still up, but just not up by enough. And why is that? Well, the businessinsider.com has suggested a couple of reasons. First of all, it's really hard for people to be interesting when they're appearing in live videos. What was that I just said? Doing something in the moment when inspiration strikes. Perhaps people just don't have enough inspiration. Perhaps people don't have a good enough and exciting enough life to want to share it with other people. You know what, Krishna? I was doing a training session recently for a well-known international charity which operates around the world. And I started off the session by showing them the promotional videos for Facebook Live and the promotional video for Periscope. And both of those had brilliant scenes, fantastic, inspirational views, comments which were out of this world, commentaries as well from war zones, from hot air balloons, from surfing to surprises and birthday parties. And they were all going, oh, this is brilliant. This is what we could do. We want to get involved. And then I showed them the two map features on Periscope and on Facebook Live. And they went, this is all a little bit rubbish, isn't it? It's all a bit rubbish, isn't it? And they were really surprised at the paucity of good streams out there. And my point to them was, the bar isn't being set very high. You can actually do some brilliant work, but by going with the tips and the hints and the training that I give you today, and you're going to be able to storm it because so many other people are putting out rubbish. So yeah, it's really hard for people to be interesting when they're appearing in live videos. And they also say if other people are viewing it, the trouble is they are not producing their own. Gosh, I've had a couple of rants so far, haven't I? And we're only 9 minutes into the show.
Well, let's about this other topic that we're going to talk about next, which is the whole issue of, in fact, privacy. Something that you know that you've covered before many times. We've covered on the show here as well. And so the question is, actually, could Facebook Live change the way that courts think about privacy law or privacy law, depending on where you're located? Now, this article is actually in Columbia Journalism. All of the links to the articles that we're actually going to be covering will be provided at the end of the show and also on our Twitter account, LS Insider, so you can read it in depth. So this is really written from the context of US law. If you're interested in law, specifically in the UK, you can go back to livestreaminsiders.com and find the replay of our show that we did with a UK lawyer just a number of months ago. So the question is, because of all the issues that we've talked about in terms of issues that are going on in locations like Dallas and police officers being involved in live streams, and we won't go into the details of all of that now. But the question that's been raised is, how will the rise of streaming mobile video challenge or complicate the law of privacy? How will lawmakers, courts, and the general public respond? And in fact, they're actually talking in the article about the fact of basically live video could become a catalyst for changes in the privacy law and also policy. So again, another topic we've talked about in the past, Peter, is about drones. We had an author on who's written one of the leading books on drones, and we talked to him about live streaming as well. And that has really made some changes, certainly in many countries, in terms of what people can do in the case of that. And they actually go back in the article, they talk to two experts, and they talk about an article that's the 1980 article in the Harvard Review by Louis Brandeis and Samuel Warren, arguing that people have a general right to privacy. Now, I have to say this differs in different countries in terms of what not only culturally our expectations are, but also what the law is. And actually what they go on and they talk about is in terms of, what is happening about information that gets collected. Just think about not live streaming, but Pokemon. I mean, there's been a whole range of responses in Europe about how different countries actually view the terms that Pokemon have actually got there. And that's irrespective of the fact that they had some glitches, so to speak, in the way, or Pokemon Go, I should say, in the way that actually they were collecting and accessing data in the first instance, and that they actually quickly rectified. They talk around in the US, and I know a lot of our viewers here are actually in the US, so I'm sure you will be very much more knowledgeable about this than we are. About under the First Amendment, state and federal courts have recognized strong protections for recording in public places, especially in cases involving police conduct, and that they're subject to time, place, and manner restrictions, meaning the right to record isn't absolute, but clearly videos like the ones that we've been talking about in recent shows, are protected by First Amendment because of their public settings and high levels of newsworthiness. I know we talked about this whole issue very recently, Peter, and you identified a great video if you're based in the UK that's also worthwhile looking at. You can find the links to our previous show notes around that. You'd come across a really good example. So interesting. There's some real questions about what's going to happen in terms of live video, what we could be sharing, what we shouldn't be sharing. And I know this is not something that's actually going to be solved overnight. And as often, because of technology, the legal world has to play catch up, and they then wait for case studies and challenges being put to them for actions to be taken. So thoughts on that, Peter? Because I know it's something that's close to your heart because of the things that you and I have talked about here on the show previously.
And the trouble is, isn't it, that laws across the world in different territories can take an awfully long time to catch up with technology. And it seems to me that technology is just kind of moving along apace. Technology begats technology and so on. So inevitably the whole speed picks up. And it's that whole balance, isn't it, of that right to live stream and the right to be left alone, the right to privacy, and whether or not you mind having a camera in your face as you're walking down the street, even though that may be in a public place. It's Live Stream Insiders. I'm Peter Stewart, and together with my co-host Krishna Day, each and every week for the past 44 of them, we bring you the very latest live stream news and special guests as well, all encapsulated in just 30 minutes. So we value your minutes, we value your megs, and you know exactly how much time you've got to put aside to bring yourself right up to date with all the live stream news. We scour all sorts of websites, all sorts of articles, and all sorts of journalists and reports to bring you the very latest news from the world of live streaming, tech, and also case studies as well. So we've got a couple of case studies on the way from the world of politics in the United States and the two conventions which have been going on recently. Now, Krishna, I don't know whether you or maybe your family are fans of the Big Bang Theory. I am, and I remember the episode where Sheldon turned himself into a bit of a robot. Well, it wasn't quite a robot. As I understand, it was kind of a tripod on a bit of a Segway. And on the top of that tripod, was Sheldon's face as on an iPad. Well, that is what's been going on at some of the conventions. They're actually calling them bots or robots, and the Washington Post doubled with Twitter and a company called Double Robotics to create a roaming bot on wheels that automatically was periscoping as it went around. So I love this story. I really do. I think it's so funny and so clever. Let me actually show you a picture here, as you can see from my notes, which are the script that we've prepared, and you can see it just here, and it's going round. And the fantastic thing is that the people at the convention were interacting with it. They must have had some kind of note on, or maybe some notification that went out before, and people realized what was happening, and they were going up and they were talking to the screen, which was live periscoping as it happened, and were interacting with it and passing on their thoughts and their comments about what was going on. And they were saying following the bot is like being with a celebrity. People turn, take pictures and follow you around. When the bot comes up to them, they are typically delighted to interact. And that occurred to me that I was surprised they were interacting, or they kind of knew what it was all about. But brilliant that they did. And I thought that sounded like great fun indeed. And you've got some more facts and stats and statistics about what the different news companies have been doing at the conventions as far as live streaming goes, yeah?
Yeah, we've got a couple of stories in terms of what's been going on in the world of politics. You know, both in Ireland and also in the UK, we've had elections of late. And we've actually seen live streaming being used and social media being used. But of course, the Americans, you guys, you just do it in such style. And so this first article that we want to kind of just bring to your attention is from Digiday. And they were talking about live video taking the center stage at the presidential conventions, and that Facebook is building a studio space at every convention where dozens of publishers can broadcast live. News outlets are also dedicating resources to cover the conventions using live video, with a focus on bringing you details of the stories, the context behind the scenes, and lots of other information. And some of the things in terms of what people are doing, ABC News, on ABC News, their website and their mobile and TV apps, they'll actually have the opportunity to actually choose from 8 simultaneous live streams. 8 simultaneous live streams. You know, some of us struggle to get one out every so often. And those streams will be everything from the speeches that are on stage to analysis of the latest news. CBSN, they're actually using 45 staffers will be actually covering news. And again, fully streamed on Twitter in terms of the partnerships that they've got there. CNN, they've actually, not a surprise at all, they've actually going to have lots of coverage of the conventions as well. In fact, I should say some of it's in the past. And CNN doesn't have a dedicated Facebook Live team, but they did have actually lots of different people. And I think we're seeing this as well, not necessarily always a dedicated team, but actually different people taking roles. Like we heard from last week, where we heard from Yusuf Omar from the Hindustan Times, where they're looking at building capability across the organization. CNN is actually, again, using different people in their organizations, not necessarily a dedicated live team. Huffington Post, they actually hadn't planned anything to be happening in terms of on stage, but they actually had 50 people in terms of covering the conventions, 5 dedicated solely to Facebook Live, and also they had people who were there for, covering things as it happened. And then Univision, which is a Hispanic broadcaster, had 12 people from its digital team taking part in it. So just to give people a sense of scale about the resources that are being placed behind live video. It's a story we've covered for many months about how people have been putting teams in place and resources and building capability. And I just think it gives a sense of actually, obviously, for something such, in terms of such big coverage, how those organizations are doing it. But in fact, there's some more up-to-date news, Peter, that you might want to touch on in terms of some of the information about the scale of the number of viewers that ABC News has been getting.
Absolutely. You know what? Just linking back to your point there about what the Huffington Post is doing. Listen to this. Of the 50 people the Huffington Post is covering the conventions, 5 are dedicated solely to producing Facebook Live videos. So of the 50, 5 are doing that. Of that group, two people, a producer and a shooter, will be focused on covering what's happening on the ground as it happens. So in other words, two people, quote, will be focused on covering what's happening on the ground as it happens. Boy, oh boy, they've got their work cut out for them, haven't they? Two people covering everything that happens on the ground as it happens. So I think they're going to be completely exhausted by now. Absolutely. So we've got some really interesting figures that have come out from obviously those conventions which have been going on. ABC News and Facebook Live's GOP convention coverage, 11.5 million views. At its peak, ABC News live streams got as many as 20,000 concurrent views, which is really good. Incidentally, let's compare that with the number of views on ABC alone for its nightly 10 p.m. broadcast, which is 20 million viewers across all of the networks. So you can see how those figures are a little bit different. And so we've got some not insubstantial figures coming out of Facebook Live, and of course still reasonably early days. However, it does have to, let's go back to that previous comment that I was saying a little bit earlier on that previous article, saying the number of, well, first of all, the number of good quality streams and also the number of people producing streams does seem to be on a bit of a wane. Live stream insiders, 9 minutes to go before the end of the show. It's not just the broadcasters who've been using Facebook Live, but we've got some interesting stats, some more user case studies coming your way. From in a moment's time, we're going to be talking about what they've been doing at London Zoo. Hopefully we can get to that before the end of the show. But also, let's take a quick look with Krishna about what various publishers are doing. So one of the oldest mediums of publishing printed books, they're coming right into the 21st century using live video, Krishna.
Yeah, so this is a story that's actually been published in Ad Exchanger. And the story is starts off talking about Meredith Corp. And Meredith Corp actually didn't really mean anything to me until I actually started to delve into what kind of publications that they actually produced. And those publications include Martha Stewart's Living and Weddings, Better Homes and Gardens, something I personally like to look at, particularly in terms of on Facebook and used to read when I was in the States. And also All Recipes, another site that I actually like to actually take a look at too. So they actually had somebody responding to them who's the SVP of Digital Platforms and Strategy. And their commentary was around the fact that Facebook Live is a form of branded content for us. In many ways, we're leading with it because it's new and interesting. Rather than plot out a 10-part video series or text and content series with an advertiser, their view is, let's put together an actual broadcast that involves our audience, involving their audience to actually connect with their brand. They've actually had more than 26 experiences of Facebook Live so far on all of the properties that I actually mentioned. And the first broadcast had reached more than 1 million viewers with over 1,400 engagements. And of course, who was that with? Well, it was Martha Stewart. And what their commentary was there, and this is interesting for those of the people who are saying, where should we go first? And this is a conversation you and I, Peter, had with somebody who's based in Europe recently, because they were said, we've got an event. We don't know whether or not we should use Periscope or Facebook Live. And their view was Periscope. And Peter's view to them very quickly was no, Facebook Live. And here's the reason that in terms of that really is behind it all. Most of our brands have several million followers already attached to their social handle on Facebook. And so therefore, when they've got that live content, it immediately can propagate across their ecosystem. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, in terms of, there's another publisher who I actually hadn't come across that some of you might know called Little Things. And their target audience is 30-somethings, and it's all about videos, stories, recipes, DIY ideas as well. And Little Things actually have 25 to 30 people dedicated to video production, and 12 of them are working on live video. And they actually say that they typically get between 2 to 3 million views and 100 to 200 comments in terms of their normal videos that they actually have on Facebook. But Facebook Live might not only get 50,000 views, but 1,000 comments. So from 100 comments on published video to 1,000 comments, and that's because people are engaged, and that's what they're really interested in terms of they're looking at making sure that they're building that part of their business. Now, really interested about the issue of raising money in terms of monetization, which I know is a commentary that we've talked about before, and in fact our viewers here today are also talking about, so how do you monetize all of this, and their view was here in terms of we're running a profitable publishing business, said the founder and CEO of Little Things. Even though Facebook Live is costing us more than it is making for us right now, we're still investing a lot of money to build specific content for it with the sole purpose of preparing for monetization in the future. So build now, get your audience behind you, and then when there's an opportunity to get monetization, explore it. Lots more in that article, including examples from Australia. Do check it out. It's the link will be in the show notes, and the articles from Ad Exchanger.
And a quote from that article that jumped out at me: he predicts that Facebook will let publishers like Little Things decide when to take a commercial break and then fill that spot with either a 15-second or less video ad that the publisher fills directly, or a Facebook house ad that'll give the publisher control over when to make those breaks instead of forcing a view through a pre or post roll. So that's quite interesting as well, that integration with the Facebook people working together for the best video, but also so it works for the publisher and the platform as well. Really, really important stuff. 4 minutes to go. I've got time to talk to you about London Zoo and how they're using Facebook video to drive what they call social growth, both live video and pre-recorded. So we'll kind of bend our rules with live stream insiders a little bit on this, as they are both integrated, and a really interesting kind of case study. It's quite short, but really interesting to see. And so let's actually quickly go through this. Essentially, you can't go wrong, can you, with video at a zoo, cute animals. I mean, you know, what's not to love there? And last month, the zoo released footage of its 2 newborn Sumatran tigers, captured just moments after they were born, and they got 500,000 video views, 500,000. And also they decided that they would go on live stream as well. Now, this links back to the article and the stats that Krishna was just talking about. On Twitter, London Zoo has got 54,000 followers. On Facebook, they've got 100,000 followers. So they used to go on Periscope, didn't get much engagement. They've ditched that. They've hopped over to Facebook Live instead, and they say it's got a longer lifespan. It allows videos to stay in the news feed even after a live broadcast. It's that archiving again, isn't it, on Facebook Live that you don't have on that other platform. The move to Facebook also enabled the organization to execute a much more streamlined and targeted strategy as well. And they say it's been really, really good. And they've had a recent video about, of all things, a beetle. Not John, Paul, George or Ringo, but a Hercules beetle, including a live Q&A with its handler of a beetle? Okay, don't know how big the blooming beetle was. And it's had 42,000 views. So, I mean, that just goes to show it could be furry or it could be a little bit of a creepy crawly. But either way, people are intrigued and people are really interested to learn more about the natural world. So that's what's been happening up the road from me, a London Zoo in our fine capital city.
Let's talk about a few updates on new apps, because we've been talking about the issue of monetization. One that has not formally launched, but they're actually doing a pre-launch at the moment. You'll find again in the show notes. It's called BidChat. And BidChat actually want to give organizations, influencers a platform to actually share live streams and also raise money for their social causes. Another one is Peak App, peakapp.co, again, launching soon, and another platform looking at monetization. And also I should actually mention a platform that Peter and I have both used and tested and has had an update this week is Huzza. Huzza.io, another platform that actually has a free platform, but also if you want to have multiple people in it, in your live streams, up to 6 people, it's a paid for platform, but it does enable monetization as well. And they've actually just put a really nice integration there with Facebook Live, which means that you don't need to use third-party tools like Wirecast or OBS. It's much easier for broadcasters to actually broadcast over to Facebook Live. I actually did a full tutorial about how to do that, including their warnings around making sure you comply with Facebook terms in terms of their platform policy. And so again, you'll find that in the show notes.
And you know what? There's 15 seconds to go with all of these different platforms. What you need is one of these, isn't it? How about this? You can have 2 different phones, 2 different devices, and streaming to 2 different platforms at the same time, or maybe the same platform, but a front and back camera. How about that? A little bit of tech to finish things off. And that is our 30-minute update from the world of live streaming, courtesy of Live Stream Insiders, Peter Stewart, Krishna Day, and bring you right up to date over the last 7 days about what's been happening and what you may have missed from the world of live streaming.
So thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode. If you've got interesting live stream case studies, we'd love to hear from you, because we do like to actually bring that into the show too and actually have guests with us. We've had lots of interesting people over the months that we've been together here on Livestream Insiders. You can find us at Livestream Insiders on Facebook or LS Insiders on Twitter. Remember to join us for next week's episode. You can subscribe now. In terms of the next episode, will be on the 7th of August, and that's at 7 p.m. if you're in the UK and Ireland, and 2 p.m. Eastern Time if you're in the US. All the details of forthcoming episodes and also our previous archives are at livestreaminsiders.com. Thanks again, everybody, for being here.